Hey everybody, I'm Hatem and I'm 10 years old.
Hey everybody, I'm Sundis. I am 9 years old. We are here rocking
in the Seacrest studio. Welcome to the Spark Talk
at Children's Hospital, Colorado. Drum roll, please.
And now,
Dylan Chodes.
Woo!
When I was in the 6th grade, I used to have the biggest crush on my neighbor, Katie Gwynn. The two of us used to walk to school together every day, which was fantastic for me because it meant that she was forced to spend 10 minutes at the beginning and afternoon of every single day with me. For months, I knew that I wanted to ask her out, but I kept chickening out. Until finally one day I came home from school again and my dad was sitting there and he said, "All right, did you ask her yet?" And sheepishly I said, "No." So he said, "Enough's enough. Go pick up the dang phone and just call the girl." So I went downstairs to where our landline was, and I got out our phone directory that we still had, and I looked up Michelle and Katie Gwynn. She had an older sister that went to school with us. So then I take the phone back into my room where it's private, and I dial her number, and I hear this sweet little angelic voice on the other end say, "Hello, Gwynn residence." So I gather all my courage, and I say, "Hi, this is Dylan. I've had a crush on you forever. Do you want to be my girlfriend?" To which I get a pause, and I hear, "Hey, Dylan, this is Michelle. Did you mean to talk to Katie?" And then she says, "Hey, Katie, it's Dylan. I think he wants to ask you to be his girlfriend." So I just hung up the phone immediately. I didn't even ask her. And even without social media, that news traveled through school like crazy. So it taught me a very valuable lesson that day, and that lesson was that I promised I would never ask out another girl as long as I lived. So if you wanted to ask me. But there was an important lesson here as well, and one that would go on to form the foundation of my personal philosophy for years to come. Throughout my life, I've had various teachers, my father being one of them, and as I got older, I was able to reflect back on the wisdom and sincerity of his words and realize that they truly had some depth, and also that they were continuously and repeatedly ripped off from this guy. In hindsight, I guess the cadence should have tipped me off. But he said, "Named must your fear be, before banish it you can." For me in this situation, this showed up as the age-old adage of, well, what's the worst that can happen? She can say no, or you can ask out her sister. But that's the worst. So it wasn't the actual act of calling her that I was afraid of. I wasn't fearful for picking up the phone and talking to somebody. Rather, it was my perception of what was going to happen in that event, my perception of what she would say, what her sister would say, what my friends would say. And it wasn't until I was able to finally vocalize what I was saying and the worst case scenario that I was able to pick up the phone and actually ask her. But what happens when we can't just name our fears and that labeling them doesn't make them go away? So this is where I grew up in Southern California, and as a very pale-skinned, freckled-faced kid, I had a very intimate relationship with sunburns, and therefore my dermatologist. So one evening, Sunday evening, my family and I were sitting downstairs watching a movie, and the phone rings. Again, this is up in the kitchen. So my mom, as she always did, paused the movie so we could listen to the voicemail, and this is what we heard. "Good evening, Michael, Michelle, and Dylan. This is Dr. Horowitz. Please give me a call back as soon as you get this." So I'd never seen the blood drain from my parents' face so quickly. Here we were on a Sunday night, and we had just gotten a call from my dermatologist asking that we call him back immediately. What seemed like 30 seconds later, I was recovering in the PACU at John Wayne Cancer Institute, formerly part of UCLA, where they had just taken a football-shaped sized chunk of skin off of my back, as well as doing a complete right side lymphadenectomy. They took all the lymph nodes out of my right armpit. So the oncologist sits us down, and he says, "Listen, guys, one of two things is going to happen here. Either the pathologist comes back and says that we caught Dylan's stage 3 melanoma in time, and essentially this is going to be the end of it. He's going to have some continuing treatment continuing follow-up appointments, and that's essentially going to be that. Option 2, on the other hand, is that it turns out that there are some metastatic cells in his lymph system, and we're going to be having a very different conversation. The results that we were told would take 2 weeks to get back ended up taking 6 weeks due to the rather inconsistent nature of medicine, especially oncology. That was the reality we were forced to live in. So for 6 weeks, I became very, very intimate with fear, and I saw that fear is not a one-size-fits-all emotion. My father, who was already a very busy man, decided that he was going to get busier. He essentially pioneered the early stages of Dr. Google. He decided that he was going to be a differential pathologist, an oncologist, and a dermatologist, seemingly overnight. That was his way of ensuring that option 2 wouldn't happen. My mother, on the other hand, tended to internalize everything. For her, all she saw was an hourglass floating over my head with the sands of time slowly running out. Anytime I would come home from school or from practice or walk down the stairs to get my 5th bowl of cereal for the afternoon, my mom's eyes would well up with tears, and she would come over and hug me and hold me as if it was the last time she was going to get to hold her son. Then I felt a third type of fear as well, and that was my own. I didn't feel an urge to engage in busy work for the sake of busy work. I just kind of felt calm about everything. But that got me wondering, what's wrong with me? I know that this is a scary situation. I had people coming up to me, asking me how I was doing. I saw how my parents' friends interacted with them, offered their condolences, asked them how they were doing. And I was wondering why I didn't feel that way. I felt like maybe I should start crying or acting out just to fit this perceived mold of emotions that I thought I was supposed to have. So in my own version of the pre-Pinterest days, I did some Googling and I came up with something like this. And what this showed me is that all of this type of inspiration, all of these words, really truly just don't mean anything to me. This is not who I am. This is who I was. This is 16-year-old Dylan, and what I love about this photo, aside from the amazing surfer hair, is the fact that this was actually taken during these 6 weeks. And I sort of have an air of calmness in this photo. So as I continued down my why don't I feel correctly search, I started paying attention to the words that people were using to describe me. Words like apathetic, or I'm being such a typical 16-year-old teenager, or I'm very stoic about something, I don't care. And those words, apathy and stoicism, kind of have a very playfully negative connotation. For a lot of us, when we think of stoicism, we think of something like this. Just a poor water buffalo trying to get on with his day, despite a rather unfortunate passenger on his head. It's kind of sad, right? But this didn't fit right either. It's not that I didn't care about anything that was going on. It's not that I just didn't feel the same way that others felt about it. I did care about it. But I was thinking, like many of us do, that apathy equals indifference. As the years went by, I kept paying attention to the words people were using, and those words, apathy, stoicism, indifference, tended to stick around. Whether it was in the high-stress environment that is college life, or sports, or just life in general, people kept using those same words, apathy. But then something changed. When I was a freshman in college, I got my EMT license and I started working as an EMT. And suddenly those words, apathy, started turning into calm. Stoicism started turning into keeping a cool head under pressure. I didn't change, but the way that my actions were perceived in these new circumstances did. My best friend Sean told me, he said, hey, listen, Dylan, I would never come to you as a shoulder to cry on, but if my life was ever in danger, I wouldn't want anybody else there except for you. So I thought, despite this backhanded compliment, that didn't actually sound so bad. I was like, I could be okay with that. I could live with that. So that's when I decided to take a deeper look into this thing called Stoicism. It is said that the Stoics were indifferent to everything, indifferent to wealth, to pain, indifferent to winning and unfound loss, hope, and everything else. But they weren't indifferent in that sense at all. It's not that they didn't care. It's simply that they were good either way. It's that when fate dealt its hand in the matter, they were good either way. The Stoics were able to transform fear into prudence, pain into transformation, mistakes into initiation, and desire into undertaking. During the popular rise of Stoicism from the transition into the Common Era, BC to AD, The words that the Stoics actually used was this, apatheia. And what this means is an insensibility to suffering. What apathy and stoicism actually is the kind of calm equanimity that comes with the absence of irrational or extreme emotions. Not the loss of feeling altogether, just the loss of the harmful, unhelpful kind. And when it was put like this, it didn't start sounding so bad to me. It kind of made sense. So I continued down this rabbit hole and came across a quote by a prominent teacher of Stoicism, a man named Seneca, and he said this, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Now this appealed to me for a few reasons. First, because it didn't require a preordained set of beliefs. It wasn't a theology in its own right. It was tangible and immediately actionable in my life. It appealed to me because it was for me. Around the same time as Seneca, a man named Epictetus, who was born a slave and went on to become a teacher of Stoicism himself, wrote this in his journal. "So-and-so's son is ill. What happened? His son is ill. Nothing else? Not a thing. So-and-so's ship sank. What happened? His ship sank. Nothing else? Not a thing. So-and-so was carted off to prison. What happened? He was carted off to prison. Nothing else? Not a thing." But if we now add, and his life is over, or his business is ruined, or he has bad luck, then that's each of us adding our own observation, our own perspective onto his account. This is one of my mom's favorite photos. This is me in 5th grade with my two best friends, Jordan and Aaron. I like this photo, but my mom seemed to love it. So whenever I moved anywhere, in the dorm or apartment or house, this picture always seemed to find its way onto my mantle or my bedroom somewhere. And I didn't really think anything of it until a few years down the road. I was working as an EMT at this point, and I was having a lot of fun with it. Working as an EMT was incredibly rewarding, and it had some amazing perks, like off-road segways. But while this was fun, it wasn't my end goal. I really enjoyed the hands-on work that I was doing, but I knew I wanted to do more. As an EMT, I got to treat patients for 10 to 20 minutes until we took them to the hospital, and that's where the nurses and the doctors would then take over and provide a higher level of care. So that was my path. That's how I was going to help people. So after another year or two of going down this road, I decided to apply to nursing schools, and I didn't get into a single nursing school, not one. And for me, that was a reality check beyond reality checks. That truly shook me to my core. Here I was with this path of what I was going to do, and it was all stripped away from me. I felt like where I was now was the only place I was ever going to get to be. So then I looked at this picture differently. Here we were, the three of us, with all this promise of success in our life, and Jordan in the middle there had gotten his undergrad in pre-med from USC, got into medical school, and just finished his first year of residency at Keck School of Medicine. Aaron, on the right-hand side, graduated with an undergrad from Brown, got a job in LA working for Bain & Company Consulting, making way too much money for our age. And here I was making $12.50 an hour with seemingly no prospects ahead of me. What I had was a pile of rejection. I had failure in my hand. My girlfriend at the time that I had all through college went on afterwards to go to Pepperdine. She was getting her master's in psychology. And the words that she was using to describe me started to change. Suddenly words like lazy and complacent started to come into the picture. I enjoyed the work I was doing, but I was rationalizing away my fear and hurt, the rejection and failure that I felt. I started becoming withdrawn. I was distancing myself from my friends who I thought were more successful than I was. I was letting my family, my friends pass me by. I was letting the perception of my events really take hold of me. The perception of what I thought my friends thought of me, what I thought my family and my girlfriend thought of me. But I knew this wasn't who I am. I wasn't this person who experienced high highs and low lows. I was the cool, level-headed, calm Dylan. So this dichotomy of my emotions really kind of made me become aware of what I was doing. So I reflected back on that journal entry by Epictetus, and I thought, what started all of this? Well, I didn't get into nursing school. What happened? I didn't get in. Nothing else? Not a thing. It was only when I started adding in my commentary and my perception of I'm not going to do anything with my life now, that my friends were better than me, that they looked down on me, that I'd let people down, I'd let my girlfriend down, that she didn't love me anymore. I remember when I went to college, and as my parents were loading me into my dorm and leaving, my dad took out a letter that he had written for me with his top 10 things to remember in life. And number 7 on that list was, we're here because others have sacrificed for us. Earn it. And now I didn't feel like I was earning it anymore. I didn't deserve the sacrifices that people had been making for me. But then I thought, why was I so afraid of this failure? Why did I let my perception of what was happening paralyze me? And it's because our perception is taught to us. In school, we're always taught to avoid failure, avoid being laughed at, avoid standing out, and certainly, by all means, avoid the big red F. But the only difference between failure and feedback is our perception of it. If we get feedback from a boss or a parent or someone whom we respect, we are eager to implement it and implement that change in our lives. But when life gives us feedback, we're taught to view it as failure and to avoid it at all costs. So once again, I heard the words once more of my father, or as it turns out, this guy again. And Yoda, who is the oldest Stoic in the Dagobah system, said this: if no mistake you have made, yet losing you are, a different game you should play. The Stoics would refer to this as flipping the obstacle. Here I was thinking that I was doing everything right. I went to a good school, I got a degree in neuroscience, I had EMT on my resume, I had plenty of volunteer experience. I thought I was checking all the boxes that I was told I needed to check, but I was still losing. I was in last place compared to my friends. I was leagues behind them. So I started thinking, well, I felt like I was doing the right thing. So what's going on here? What's my story? What am I not telling? So when I thought about how I can actually start playing my game, I realized that what I had done is that I've seen teenagers who were experimenting with drugs dead in ugly motel rooms. I've seen babies thrown on the floors out of anger. I've had a grandma who was stuck between the toilet and the bathtub hit on me. I've shared pain and heartbreak, joy and sadness. I've held people as they cried and watched their loved ones died. And when I realized that that's my game, that's the story I needed to tell, when I started telling that story, the following year I got into every single nursing school that I applied to. Through our perception of our events, we are implicit in the creation and therefore the destruction of every single one of our obstacles. But by learning the type of self-mastery that the Stoics taught, if we shine our perspective through the aperture of calm equanimity that comes with the absence of irrational or extreme emotions that is Stoicism, we can start to name our fears, turn them into feedback, and begin to play a different game. I'd like to finish with a popular anecdote of a very famous Stoic. Thomas Edison, in 1914, he returned home from his lab one day when a series of large explosions went off at his plant. As he calmly made his way to the fire, he told his son he said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see another fire like this as long as they live." When his son rejected or protested, he said, "Don't worry, it's all right. We've just got rid of a lot of rubbish." Well, that rubbish was about $1 million in thoughts and prototypes and everything, but by jumping back into the work, by looking at it through a different perspective, he was able to turn that negative around, and the next year they went on to make $10 million in revenue. So I encourage you to ask yourselves, where might you be feeling failure when you should be seeing feedback? Where might you be letting your perception of events create this false narrative in your life? So turn to whomever you have, whomever you respect, your partner, your spouse, your boss, or your friends, and ask them to help you with that perspective. But if you don't have that somebody in your life, if you don't have that Yoda, then please reach out to me, and together let's see if we can start playing a different game. Thank you.